Steve Johnson positioned himself outside his wife's office at 7 p.m., ready to end the farce they called a marriage. While some men ignore the clues over time, especially when their wives have never stayed late at work before, Steve noticed right away and decided to confront the situation. He estimated that this had been going on for about 2 months, starting from the day he saw his wife, Angela, wearing red high heels to the office. Angela had always hated wearing heels, only putting them on for special occasions like weddings or, more frequently, in the bedroom, where she paired them with white stockings, a lacy bra, and matching underwear. Steve adored the white thigh-highs and thought their love life was great, but Angela had never worn high heels to work, which made Steve suspicious. He asked her if anything was up, and she explained she had an important meeting with her boss and wanted to appear professional. Angela hesitated briefly before walking away without turning back. Steve stayed quiet, mulling over her choice and whether it really matched a professional setting. The reality emerged gradually. At first it was an extra hour here and there, but soon it became 2 or 3 hours several days a week. Steve put the pieces together when Angela attended a bachelorette party. She hated clubs, salons, and bars, preferring dinner or coffee dates. Angela also disapproved of drinking and looked down on those who did. When she attended a third bachelorette party at her boss Martin Schindler's house in Glen Ellyn, Steve recognized the place from previous events. After waiting an hour to confirm her intentions, he deflated all 4 tires of her car and went home. Angela never mentioned the incident with the tires, but she told their daughter Jenny, relieved that someone had just let the air out rather than slashing them. Jenny doubted the story, but Angela insisted, grateful the damage hadn't been worse. Steve told her to keep an air pump in the trunk just in case. Angela admitted she'd been out at a dance club with friends and suggested she might avoid it in the future. Steve then sought legal advice and started the divorce process, which led him to wait in his car near her office, preparing for her to be served. Despite the sadness of ending 21 years of marriage, they shared a 17-year-old daughter, Jenny, whom Steve cherished. He and Angela had met when she was a receptionist studying to become a paralegal, and she had helped him resolve a contract dispute. They dated blissfully for 2 years before getting married, and Steve believed they had a happy marriage until Angela began working for Martin Schindler. Though Steve's truck driving job kept him away for long hours, they made the most of their time together as a family, going on weekend trips around Jenny's schedule, which was packed with sports and other activities. They visited Galena, Illinois for the wineries and Lake Geneva, Wisconsin for shopping and relaxation. Angela's infidelity had gone unnoticed until her change in footwear revealed the truth, and from that point she began to drift away from Steve. He had never suspected her before, but he noticed a shift in her behavior, especially after he followed her one night and tried to connect with her. "How about dinner and a movie tonight? I've got a rare Friday off and I'd like to spend it with you," he suggested. She responded coldly, "You know the deal Fridays are for my girls. They rely on me as their designated driver." Steve tried to convince her they can manage without you for one night. "With your long work hours and those nights out, I hardly see you." Angela shot back, "If you had a real job that didn't keep you on the road all the time, we'd have more time together. But you don't. I put up with it for 20 years. Deal with it without saying goodbye." She walked away, leaving him stunned. Steve followed her out to the garage, saw her drive off, and quickly grabbed his keys, deciding to follow her. Their neighborhood had just one exit, a maze of streets leading out from their home. He caught up with her on Main Street and followed her all the way to Martin's house. He avoided her for the rest of the weekend, and by Monday he resolved to meet with a lawyer. He wasn't looking to burn everything down, he just wanted a quiet end to their relationship, feeling that Angela no longer desired him. He couldn't see the point in holding on to a failing marriage and believed she could have her boss without a fight. He shared his thoughts with Jenny that Monday, explaining that her mother was seeing her boss and admitting that he believed she was unfaithful. Jenny, whom he affectionately called Pumpkin, listened to him. "It's hard to believe, Dad. I haven't noticed anything different over the past few months," she said. "But I have," he replied. "No way, Daddy. I just can't believe it." Steve shook his head. "I followed her to his place. She said she was going out with friends, but she went straight to his house." "But her tires got damaged at the club, right?" Jenny questioned. "No, sweetie. That was me. I let the air out right outside her boyfriend's house when I realized she wasn't headed to any club." Jenny struggled to accept it. It's hard to believe, Dad, he nodded. Me too, but it's true. Jenny stayed beside him in the car, bracing for the conflict that would inevitably follow. Are you sure, Dad? Is there no chance? She asked hopefully. No, pumpkin. It's over. She broke my trust and shattered my heart. I can't tolerate that kind of betrayal, even if she had her reasons. There's no excuse for a long-term affair. Maybe if she had been drunk, or if it had only happened once, it would be different. Or if she had been assaulted. But this was her choice, and she broke my trust. Trust is everything. You can't love someone you don't trust, and I can't love someone who betrayed me like that. Our marriage is over. As they sat in the car, Jenny spotted two men approaching through the window. Meanwhile, from inside her law office, Angela Johnson looked out, watching them with Martin. What a fool, she remarked, relieved that the office windows were tinted gold, keeping them hidden from view. Steve couldn't believe what was happening. He thought he'd take everything from me, he thought. There was no affection, just cold calculation. It took Martin 6 months to lure Angela in, grooming her as a replacement for his ex-wife, whose 19-year marriage had recently ended. Martin was fed up with his ex's constant complaints, weight gain, and lack of interest, feeling ashamed to be seen with her. He finally ended things after their twins left for college. Angela, though the same age as his ex, had a refined elegance, with a toned body like a woman in her 30s. She was strikingly beautiful. Martin had even upgraded her wardrobe, envisioning her as the perfect partner for a successful boss. A knock on the car window snapped Steve out of his thoughts. "Are you Stephen Johnson?" a man asked, rolling down the window. Steve confirmed. Yes, the man handed him some papers. "You've been served. Please read them carefully. A restraining order requires you to stay at least 100 meters away from Angela Johnson, Jennifer Johnson, and your family home." Steve was stunned as his daughter, Jenny, grabbed the envelope and skimmed the contents. When she saw the words divorce and restraining order, she handed the papers back, bewildered. "What the hell is this?" Steve shouted. "Oh no, Dad," Jenny moaned. "I swear I didn't know." "What are you talking about?" he demanded. She gave him the remaining documents, revealing allegations of spousal abuse, child endangerment, and harassment. "Jenny, why?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Dad, I promise I didn't do this. It's all lies or a mistake." "Wait, how did she know you'd be here right now?" Jenny's response hit him like a blow because I told her. Her confession crushed Steve's spirit. "When you told me she was cheating, I confronted her. She said she only did it because she had a report from a private investigator claiming you cheated first," Jenny explained. "Are you serious? Did you even see the report?" he demanded, the betrayal stinging. "No, I didn't," she admitted. "You believed her over me? You let her set me up. Why, Jenny? I asked you not to say anything." Tears ran down his face as he stopped listening to her explanations. "You need to go now, Jenny. I can't be near you. I don't want to be within 100 meters of you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, no," she cried out. "Leave, or I could be arrested. The sheriff's still watching me," he insisted, pointing out the officer nearby. As she left the car, he scanned the papers again, realizing his accounts had also been frozen. "They've locked everything down. What am I supposed to do now?" he muttered, defeated. "Congratulations to you both, you've destroyed me. I can't even fight her high-powered law firm with all these lies." As Jenny stepped out, she vowed, "I'll fix everything, Daddy," and ran into the office building. Inside, Martin and Angela were finishing their tryst, looking satisfied. "That was great, darling," Angela murmured. "I just wish I had binoculars to see his face," she joked, adjusting her dress as Martin fastened his belt. But their moment was interrupted as Jenny stormed into the office, shouting, "You're a liar! Child endangerment, harassment. What's wrong with you?" Jenny's rage filled the room, but Angela remained calm. "I had to strike first. Now he's barred from the house and his money. I hold all the cards," Angela said with a smirk. Jenny stepped closer, glaring. "He never hurt you. Did he ever cheat?" she demanded. Angela laughed. "Of course not. Why would I need him to?" she replied mockingly. Jenny's anger boiled over, and she swung, hitting her mother squarely in the face. Angela collapsed, shocked, as Martin laughed and commented, "Nice punch." Kid Jenny froze, then glanced around the room. Disgusted, she swept everything off a nearby table, sending books and papers flying. She turned to Martin, speaking slowly, "Don't you ever cross my path again. I can hurt you, and I will if you try." She walked out, leaving Angela and Martin stunned. On her way out, Jenny encountered a man holding an envelope. "Are you Angela Johnson?" he asked. "She's inside," Jenny said coldly, rushing past him. Inside, Angela and Martin found twisted amusement in the fact that she had just been served with Steve's divorce petition. Meanwhile, Jenny desperately tried to reach her father, knowing he couldn't respond without risking further trouble. Every missed call broke Steve's heart, knowing that Angela might use it against him and involve the police. She had isolated him from their friends, and only his parents and brother believed in his innocence. Even his sister-in-law kept him away from his niece and nephew, worried that the accusations might be true, nearly tearing apart her marriage to George until Jenny forced her to reveal the truth. Steve couldn't understand what he had done to earn such hostility from Angela or the betrayal from Jenny. Even without knowing about the false charges, she had informed her mother that he was aware of the affair and the divorce papers. She had claimed she would support him when Angela was served, but instead she had stayed silent, knowing he was about to be served. Desperate to help her father, Jenny learned that her mother's lawyer worked in the same office, making it impossible for her to reach him for support. She reached out to her grandfather George, hoping he could help. "What do you need, young lady?" her grandfather asked when she called. "We have to help Dad. I don't know where else to turn," she pleaded. "I can't believe what you did to your father, Jenny. What were you thinking, siding with your mother?" George said, his voice stern, "It's all a lie, Grandpa. I didn't do anything. This is all her." And that lawyer, Jenny cried, struggling to stay composed. "Watch your tone, girl," he warned. "I'm sorry, Grandpa. I promise I never blamed him for any of this. I had no idea my confrontation with her would blow up like this," she explained. "Fine. I'll see what I can do," George replied. "Is he there? Can I speak with him?" she asked, her voice breaking. "He can't have any contact with you until this restraining order is lifted. Every call from you makes him worry that your mother will find out and call the police. His lawyer managed to set a court date, but until then there's nothing we can do." Jenny's tears flowed freely as she whispered, "Grandpa, please tell him I love him and miss him so much." "I'll pass along your message if I see him," her grandfather replied. Jenny hung up, tears streaming down her face for several minutes. Once she regained her composure, she stormed into her mother's room, throwing Angela's undergarments and new outfits down the stairs. Hauling another pile outside, she dumped the clothes on the front lawn, some still bearing tags. "Screw you, Mom," she muttered as she retrieved lighter fluid from the barn, dousing the garments and setting them ablaze with a match. Realizing her mother would be home soon, Jenny settled into a lawn chair, roasting marshmallows over the flames. Angela pulled into the driveway, eyes widening at the sight. "Jenny, what are you doing?" she shouted. "Nothing, Mom." "I've just lost it," Jenny replied sarcastically. "I'm making you pay for the days Dad can't talk to me. This is just the beginning. I'll keep burning your stuff until you drop those false charges. Try to touch me, and I'll report your abuse, and I'll make sure everyone knows your boyfriend asked me to show him my underwear. This will keep burning until I can talk to Dad." Angela, fuming, stormed into the house, trying to call Steve, but he ignored her call and deleted the voicemail without listening to it. A short while later, a fire truck and a police car arrived, alerted by a neighbor about the flames. An officer and a firefighter approached Jenny. "What's going on here, young lady?" the officer asked. "My mom wanted to get rid of some clothes, so she told me to burn them," Jenny explained casually. "Looks like you can't have a fire in the front yard." "Is your mother home?" he asked. "Yes," Jenny replied. The firefighter offered, "I can put it out with a hose if you'd like." Another firefighter asked, "Did you use anything to start it, or just light up the clothes?" Jenny answered proudly, "A whole can of lighter fluid. We don't have water, but there's some sand I can use." As he managed the fire, the officer rang the doorbell. Angela, ready to confront her daughter, was startled to see the police. "We've taken care of the fire, ma'am, but it's against city regulations to have an open fire in your yard," the officer informed her. Angela snapped, "I didn't know that." "Here's your fine, ma'am. Just pay it, no court appearance needed this time. But next time, consider donating clothes to Goodwill. There are people who could use them," he said, handing her the ticket. Angela slammed the door in frustration. Angela's lawyer represented her at the restraining order hearing the following Monday, opting not to extend it since he knew it was baseless. It had served its purpose, buying Angela time and smearing Steve's reputation. Steve's lawyer countered by seeking perjury charges against Angela, but without solid evidence, the judge dismissed the claim. Although the restraining order was dropped, it offered Steve little relief. The false accusations, his frozen assets, and the betrayal by both Angela and Jenny weighed heavily on him, driving him into a deep depression. He took time off work, struggled with drinking, and felt trapped in a downward spiral. When Angela and Jenny were out, Steve visited the house, using the garage door to gain entry despite the changed locks. He found his belongings packed in boxes and trash bags. Among the items, Angela had left behind the wedding album and family photos. Though his relationship with his family was strained, he kept in touch, even as they urged him to seek help from a therapist. He refused, convinced he didn't need a professional to confirm his misery. Angela's law firm launched a ruthless campaign, informing Steve's employer about the restraining order and the false abuse claims, leading to his termination. His contract's morality clause applied in such cases, and while he might have challenged it under different circumstances, he felt too defeated to fight back. Steve's whereabouts remained largely unknown, with his family only hearing from him through phone calls. The only times he appeared in public were for mandatory court sessions regarding the divorce, where he spoke solely to his lawyer and the judge. Each time Jenny tried to approach him, he ignored her, looking lifeless, like a shell of his former self. Angela took satisfaction in how events had unfolded, her resentment towards Steve having simmered long before she ever met Martin. Throughout her deceitful maneuvers, her feelings had hardened into near hatred. After a lengthy legal battle, the divorce was finalized. Steve recovered a portion of the assets, sold the house with the help of his lawyer, and kept his truck. However, rumors about child abuse, though never formally charged, tainted his reputation, making it nearly impossible to find work locally. Needing a fresh start, Steve relocated to Chicago, where he found a job as a truck driver. He packed up his belongings, said goodbye to his parents, and prepared to leave. When Jenny arrived, she ran up to him, tearfully saying, "Dad, I'm so sorry. This should never have happened." He hugged her, but didn't return her embrace, crying quietly. "You sided with your mother without proof, and now everything's fallen apart. I filed for divorce first to catch her off guard. Now do you understand why?" he asked. "I didn't know, Daddy." "I'm so sorry." He shook his head. "I'm leaving, Jenny. This false claim about child abuse, it's a stain that won't wash away. One day your mother and Martin will pay for what they've done. Goodbye, Jennifer. I loved you more than life itself." As Jenny's grandmother pulled her into a comforting hug, Steve climbed into his truck and drove away. Meanwhile, Martin proposed to Angela on the very day her divorce was finalized. "Angela, will you marry me?" he asked. "Yes, Martin, absolutely," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around him in the middle of the restaurant. "Let's go celebrate at your place," she suggested after they settled the bill. Eager to move in and redecorate, Angela planned to replace the old furniture and drapes chosen by Martin's ex-wife, starting with a brand-new bedroom set. As they left, Martin smirked at the sight of his ex, Carol, dining with her parents. Disgusted, Carol spat at him, but he ignored her, focusing only on Angela. In Chicago, Steve arrived at the truck warehouse, spotting his colleague Lou. "Steve, what's up, man? You look like you've seen better days," Lou remarked. "My divorce was finalized today," Steve replied with a heavy sigh. "Well, after everything she put you through, you deserve to unwind a bit," Lou suggested. "It's not just about her, it's my daughter too. She took her side and it's tearing me up. She keeps calling and emailing, but I can't even bring myself to answer. Maybe I should talk to a therapist," Steve admitted. "You might want to blow off some steam," a familiar voice suggested from behind. It was Marianne. "That's not a bad idea," Lou agreed. "Who needs a worn-out guy like me?" Steve muttered, but Marianne leaned in close, whispering words of comfort before walking away, leaving everyone watching her graceful exit. Encouraged by his friends, Steve decided to take a chance with Marianne. They went out for dinner, caught a movie, and enjoyed coffee and cake at Baker Square. Marianne assured him, "You're a good person going through a tough time. Things will get better." As they reflected on their pasts, Steve opened up about his struggles. "For the longest time I couldn't understand what I did to deserve all that anger from my ex. She was awful, but it's over now," he said, taking her hand. Marianne smiled and encouraged him to focus on the future. "Let's move forward, not dwell on the past," she suggested, and Steve promised to make it worth her while. Smiling, he squeezed her hand and as they left, Marianne pulled him into a gentle kiss. "Want to see my place?" she offered. Steve hesitated but admitted he wasn't ready. Undeterred, Marianne took his hand, leading him inside. Bathed in the soft glow of moonlight, they kissed and slowly undressed, cherishing every moment of their time together. Marianne eventually lay down on the bed while Steve knelt beside her, sharing his thoughts. He remarked that her previous loss had become his gain, and that he intended to make the most of it. As he kissed her, he assured her that he was always available for her. About a week later, a man dressed in black approached the back entrance of a luxurious home in town, expecting to break in. He smirked when he found the door unlocked. Moving silently through the house, he reached his target room. The room's setup matched what he had seen in a Facebook photo of his target at his desk, with the picture even set as the man's screensaver. The closet was positioned behind and to the right of the desk, and the room was dimly lit by a small lamp. Although the closet door was shut, the man had a clear view of the space. He slipped inside the closet behind the counter and waited. His only worry was that the target might approach the closet before sitting down, which could complicate things. Nevertheless, he felt confident that everything would go as planned, providing him with the perfect alibi. Martin Schindler entered his home office, glancing at the computer screen angled on his desk, his back to the closet. The intruder slowly pushed open the closet door, slipping out soundlessly. Martin turned at the noise, but it was too late. He found a gun pressed against his head just before the trigger was pulled. The shooter then placed the gun in Martin's hand and left a note on the desk reading, "Price paid in full," before slipping out through the same door. Not long after, Angela returned from the store, eager to show Martin the new bedding she'd bought. As she stepped into his office, she let out a horrified scream, seeing his lifeless body slumped in the chair. She immediately dialed emergency services, noticing the gun in his hand and the note on the desk. Resisting the urge to touch anything, she read the note, its message hitting her like a shock. "No, Steve, no," she cried out, panic in her voice. "What have you done?" Detective Devontae Jordan received the call and quickly arrived at the Schindler residence. He found Angela weeping in the living room as crime scene technicians moved about the office. While examining the scene, he noticed a new set of golf clubs in a corner and remarked, "Nice clubs." He then turned his attention to the gun, which was still in Martin's right hand. Asking one of the officers who had arrived earlier about the situation, he learned that it appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The victim was identified as Martin Schindler, a lawyer, with Angela Johnson, his fiancée, being the one who discovered the body and called 911. A short typed note was found on the computer, unsigned and containing a single line. Detective Jordan put the note in an evidence bag, frowning as he questioned Angela about its meaning. Angela insisted, "It wasn't a suicide. My ex-husband, Steve, killed him. Martin hated guns, he didn't even own one like that." She believed Steve had done it out of jealousy, convinced that Martin had stolen her away. Angela admitted to having been in a relationship with Martin while she was still married to Steve. Detective Jordan considered other possible motives, including potential anger from Martin's ex-wife over being left. Angela gave him her whereabouts for the time of death, trying to appear cooperative. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, Detective Jordan paid a visit to Steve Johnson, asking about his activities the night before. Steve explained that he had been driving his rig through Rockford, arriving at his station around 9:30 p.m. The detective informed him of Martin's apparent suicide, hinting at some inconsistencies. Steve offered additional information and shared his new phone number for follow-up contact. As Detective Jordan left, he mulled over the oddities surrounding the case, such as a left-handed man allegedly shooting himself with his right hand, typing a note, and the minimal gunpowder residue on his hand. These inconsistencies nagged at him as he prepared to continue his investigation in Chicago. After the detective's departure, Steve sat down at his kitchen table, looking thoughtful. Lou, his co-worker, asked what the visit meant. Steve chuckled, shaking his head. "Can you believe it? My ex's new fiancé Ans killed himself," he remarked sarcastically. Lou expressed hope that Steve's alibi would hold up, and the two shared a laugh, clinking their beer bottles together in a toast. Meanwhile, Angela sat in the front row at Martin's funeral, mourning the man who had so easily pulled her away from her loving husband. Tears streamed down her face for the man who persuaded her to join him in a destructive path and to betray a good man. She thought back to how she had once been deeply in love with her truck driver husband before transferring to work under Martin's management. He had targeted her right away, breaking her down with snide remarks about Steve's job and belittling him during their trips. It was too simple for Martin. He planted doubts in her mind, which grew over time as she focused on Steve's long hours and nights away from home. Angela couldn't tell if she was crying for her lost fiancé, her broken marriage, or the strained relationship with her daughter. It all seemed pointless. Lost in her thoughts, she paid no mind to the whispers around her or the glares from Martin's ex-wife and daughters, who blamed her for his death. "You could come to the funeral and pay your respects," Angela suggested to Jenny, who had come home from college for the weekend. Jenny's eyes narrowed. "How dare you tell me to respect the man who destroyed my father? Forget it. I won't even call that piece of garbage a man," she retorted, slamming the door as she left, heading back on the long drive to her college in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Detective Jordan sat in a meeting with his superior, frustrated by the lack of progress in the investigation. All the suspects' alibis check out. Steve Johnson's truck tracker shows no stops between Madison and Chicago, and the timing fits. The warehouse team confirmed he was the driver, he reported. The case remained full of questions with no clear answers in sight. Angela Johnson's receipts and surveillance footage placed her at Macy's, Victoria's Secret, and Starbucks during the window identified by the medical examiner as Martin Schindler's time of death. Was it his ex-wife's birthday? The commander asked Detective Jordan. "No, they were just celebrating it. I even checked on Johnson's daughter. She was at her college over 3 hours away in Wisconsin," Jordan replied. The commander then asked, "Could it have been a suicide?" Jordan hesitated. "It's possible, but I don't think so," the commander concluded. "With no suspects, no motive, and no solid evidence pointing to murder, we'll close it as a suicide." Jordan nodded, leaving the room, visibly frustrated. 6 months later, Angela invited Jason Davis over for dinner, their third date. After a passionate night together, Jason went home, cracked open a beer, and sat down to check his emails. As he sat at the kitchen table, a gun was suddenly pressed to his head, and the trigger was pulled. The assailant placed the weapon in Jason's hand and left a note. "Price paid in full." Detective Jordan arrived at the apartment, moving through to the kitchen, where he was handed the suicide note. He sighed. "Damn, I knew something wasn't right before. Now I just need to find out who did this." He asked a technician. "Any fingerprints?" The tech responded, "Yes, but it looks like they belong to the victim." "Any witnesses?" "Who called it in?" Jordan questioned. "A neighbor heard the shot and called 911. Nobody saw anyone enter or leave." Of course, the detective examined the scene further. No signs of forced entry, no broken locks or windows. Looks like they came through the balcony. The sliding door wasn't locked. The victim likely wasn't worried about it since he was on the second floor. But anyone of average height could probably climb up and reach it, the technician explained. "Average height for a man or a woman?" Jordan asked. "An average man or a tall woman could manage it," came the reply. "Where's his phone?" Jordan asked, picking it up with gloved hands to check the call log. "Just had to see. The last call was to Angela Johnson," he muttered. "I'll be surprised if she's not involved." After the usual condolences and small talk, Jordan asked Angela why her partners seemed to end up in apparent suicides. She replied that she believed Steve, her ex-husband, was behind it, punishing her. She claimed she had been home all night, adding that her alarm system could verify her claim. Angela explained that the alarm system tracked door and window activity. She said she armed it after Jason left the previous night and only disarmed it when the detective arrived that morning. She insisted it remained active throughout the night. When Jordan pressed her about why she thought Steve was responsible, she admitted that she couldn't see anyone else having a motive. The detective also asked if Steve had contacted her or followed her since the divorce, but she denied any such interactions. Despite her lack of evidence, she remained certain it was him. Before leaving, Jordan curiously asked about her height and again offered his condolences, asking her to stay nearby in case he needed more information. Back at the station, the chief asked Jordan, "Was the note the same?" Jordan confirmed. "Yes, sir," the chief instructed him. "Keep me updated daily. This is too much of a coincidence. Her alibi seems solid, but see if you can poke holes in it. Now, go talk to her ex-husband." Jordan agreed, but he had a nagging feeling that all the prime suspects' alibis might hold up just like before. When Jordan arrived at Steve's place, he found Steve and Marianne lounging on the couch, watching Jack Ryan on Prime. Steve answered the door and invited the detective in. "What can I do for you today, detective?" he asked. "Where were you last night around 1:30 a.m.?" Jordan asked. "I was driving back from Detroit. Got in around 2:30. "What's happened now?" Steve responded. Jordan inquired, "Do you know Jason Davis?" Steve looked puzzled. "I don't think so." "Why?" Jordan continued. "He was involved with your ex-wife. Seems he shot himself last night." Steve raised an eyebrow. "No way. Looks like a suicide, huh? Maybe she's got a knack for it, like a black widow or something." Jordan thanked him and headed out, while Steve chuckled as he closed the door. "What was that all about, honey?" Marianne asked. "Looks like another one of my ex's boyfriends bit the dust," Steve replied. "Oh my God," she whispered, covering her mouth with her hand. Steve shrugged. "At least I've got an alibi." "Hopefully, whoever's doing this keeps picking times when I'm on the road." Just then, Steve's phone buzzed. He saw it was Jenny calling and decided to ignore it. Marianne sighed. "Will she ever have a chance to speak with you again?" Steve looked irritated. "Why does she need one?" She sided with her mom, he snapped. Marianne tried to calm him down. "She misses you." "We talked," she began, but Steve cut her off, shouting. She placed a hand on his arm, urging him to take a deep breath. "I'm not meddling, Steve. It's your decision, and you're the one who has to live with it," she assured him. She mentioned that his former friend still followed him on Facebook, often seeing tags from places like sushi restaurants and expressing hope that Steve was doing well. Marianne explained that this friend frequently reached out to her, curious about Steve and expressing a desire to reconnect. She described how Steve's friend admired how she managed his schedule, ensuring he was home when needed. Marianne shared memories of how his friend would call to chat, reminiscing about Steve's road trips and the stories he'd tell over breakfast. Steve sighed, recalling those times with a hint of nostalgia. "Marianne, I love you, but please stay out of this," he said gently. She hugged him and promised, "I'm not getting involved. I won't push you into anything, it's all up to you." He nodded, holding her close and turning off the show they'd been watching. Back at the station, Jordan debriefed his boss. "I've got nothing to link her directly to the crime scenes, Chief. No signs of forced entry, no useful fingerprints or footprints, and nothing unusual about the blood spatter. If it weren't for the identical notes, I'd have written both off as suicides," Jordan reported. The chief asked about Angela's alibi. "It's as tight as a nuclear reactor," Jordan said, emphasizing how solid it seemed. They also discussed Schindler's ex-wife's movements, noting that she'd been seen on CCTV at a club with her new partner while her children were at school. 2 years later, Angela shifted her approach to dating, deciding to steer clear of relationships after a string of incidents involving partners who had died by apparent suicide. Despite this, she continued casual flings until contracting an STD, which made her rethink her choices. Wanting stability, she began seeing Lance Forrest, and after a month their relationship became public, though some criticized her openness. Tragically, Lance was found shot while watching a game at home. The weapon lay in his hand, accompanied by the same ominous note as before. Detective Jordan received a call from Detective Stan Anson in Schomburg, who asked if there were any unsolved cases that might be connected to his. Jordan confirmed that he had a case involving similar fully paid suicides, which intrigued Anson. Anson mentioned he had encountered a similar situation and asked if Jordan's case involved Angela Johnson. Jordan confirmed that Angela was the deceased man's girlfriend and inquired about the alibi of her ex-husband. Anson replied that Steve's alibi was solid, he was in Madison at the time. Anson added that Angela was home alone, with her security system providing an alibi, much like before. This time, Angela had ordered Chinese food, delivered within half an hour of the shooting, as verified by a neighbor's 911 call. Although her home was close to Lance's apartment, the timeline made it hard to see how she could have committed the crime. Jordan agreed, and they arranged to meet the next day to compare notes. Despite their efforts, all alibis held firm and no new suspects surfaced, leaving the cases unresolved. Meanwhile, Steve and Marianne sat in the Great Hall, watching Jenny walk across the stage to receive her bachelor's degree. Steve couldn't contain his pride, wiping away a tear. Marianne squeezed his hand and kissed it. After the ceremony, as they walked to their car, Marianne encouraged Steve to reach out to someone he cared deeply about. He refused, saying that person had chosen her mother over him and only regretted it later out of guilt for how her mother treated him. Feeling betrayed by her lack of support, he highlighted how it had affected his life. Marianne acknowledged his feelings, but he remained firm, saying they all had to live with the consequences. She frowned at his unyielding stance and held his hand, asking if he had been this stubborn before the divorce. He admitted he hadn't been nearly as resolute. 5 years later, Angela and Jenny attended Steve Johnson's wake and funeral at a large memorial service. Steve had passed away from pancreatic cancer 4 weeks after walking Jenny down the aisle at her wedding. While he had made a few new friends and colleagues, he never rebuilt the extensive social network he had before the divorce. Many of his old friends, neighbors, and former co-workers came to pay respects to the good man they had lost touch with over the years. Marianne, his longtime girlfriend, was present but made an effort not to lash out at Angela for the pain she had caused Steve. Steve's best friend, Lou Deco, shared stories with Jenny about her father's final years, filling her in on memories she had never known. Marianne had been instrumental in persuading Steve to listen to Jenny's pleas and reconcile with her when he received his terminal diagnosis. For years, Steve had ignored Jenny's letters, deleted her emails, and refused her calls. The timing of their reunion couldn't have been better, as Jenny adjusted her wedding date at considerable expense to ensure her father could give her away. Their emotional reunion and walk down the aisle provided Steve with a final sense of peace before he lost his battle with cancer. His last words to Marianne were thanks for reuniting him with Jenny and an apology for not marrying her, though she understood and never pressured him, content with their relationship as it was. Marianne later told Jenny how much Steve had missed her over the years and regretted not reaching out sooner. When Angela asked about it, Jenny shared moments of their reconciliation, saying he came to my graduation, sitting quietly in the back. Marianne was there with him. He followed my career, proud of my work as a detective in Streamwood. He kept clippings from the Herald on his walls. Marianne added he called you a crime scene expert. He said it was because of all those crime shows you watched together when you were little, like Columbo. He always hoped you'd make it to a bigger city like Chicago and do great things. Throughout most of the wake, Jenny smiled as she listened to stories of her father's life after the divorce, pleased to finally meet Marianne in person. Though his new life had not been perfect, Steve had found a sense of contentment before he passed. After the funeral, Jenny offered a final prayer, grateful that he had found peace at last. Angela tried to reconnect with Jenny during the wake and funeral but shattered any hope of reconciliation with a poorly timed comment during the lunch afterward. Alone with Jenny after most people had left, Angela remarked, "Jenny, I finally found peace." Stunned, Jenny shot back, "What do you mean?" Mom Angela explained. "I've avoided relationships for years, afraid your dad would ruin them. Now that he's gone, I can move on." Enraged, Jenny retorted, "You heartless witch, now you're relieved he's dead so you can have a good time." "I thought maybe you'd changed, but now I hope you rot in hell." Angela tried to respond, but Jenny cut her off. "The next time I see you, Mom, will be when we bury you." Despite Angela's attempts to explain, Jenny left with a final, "Goodbye, Mom. Enjoy your new life." It was the last time they spoke. 10 months later, Angela and her boyfriend, Charlie Harron, enjoyed a dinner at a fancy steakhouse. Afterward, Charlie expressed how much he appreciated their 8 months together. Angela squeezed his hand, sharing that she felt lucky to have found love again after such a difficult time. Charlie then confessed his love and proposed. Angela took a deep breath before accepting, thinking to herself that with Steve gone, she had nothing left to worry about. A week later, Charlie sat on his back porch, reflecting on their upcoming wedding and Angela's move into his home. Taking a deep drag from his Cuban Monte Cristo, cigar, he exhaled with satisfaction just before a gun was pressed to his temple and the trigger was pulled. A gun was placed in his hand, a cigar rested in an ashtray, and a note was left beneath a heavy ashtray on the table, reading, "The price has been paid in full." Angela ended her call with Detective Jordan, her cheeks stained with tears from their emotional conversation. Heading to the bathroom, she grabbed a bottle of sleeping pills she kept for emergencies, even though she hadn't needed them for a while. She walked to the mailbox, slipped an envelope inside, and raised the flag for outgoing mail. Lying down on her bed, Angela reminisced about her wedding to Steve, the joy of that day, her pride in Jenny's achievements, and memories of family vacations and park outings. She deeply regretted ever crossing paths with Martin Schindler, recognizing how it had unraveled her life. She whispered a prayer, hoping to reunite with Steve, placed a note on her chest, and drifted into her final sleep. Her note read, "My price has been paid in full." Jenny arrived home carrying groceries and a stack of mail. After putting everything in its place, she hung her keys on the hook and kicked off her shoes. Her husband, Blake, wouldn't be home until nearly midnight due to his late shift as a police officer. Relishing the quiet, she uncorked a bottle of California Cabernet and filled a glass. As she sorted through the mail, a letter caught her eye, and she froze when she saw the sender's name, Angela Johnson. Tearing it open, she read her mother's final message, slowly understanding the true intent behind her mother's suicide. "Wow, Mom." "Wow," she whispered into the empty room. She quickly dialed Detective Jordan on her cell phone. "Detective Jordan, it's Jenny Stanger, Steve and Angela Johnson's daughter." "Hello, Jenny. I'm sorry to hear about your mother's passing," he replied. "At least it's not a case for me to investigate now. What can I do for you?" "I found a letter from my mother. A confession." "What?" Jordan exclaimed. "A confession about all the supposed suicides being actual murders? That's unbelievable. My God. All right, meet me at my office as soon as you can." Jenny tossed the first page into the fireplace, ensuring it burned completely. The letter's contents revealed. "My dearest Jenny, I leave you this final gift of my repentance. Whether or not you believe me, know that I love you deeply and I am sorry for all the pain I caused. I never meant to harm you or your father. It's my greatest regret. When Charlie died, I knew you were the only one who could hold me accountable. I accept my fate and apologize for placing this burden on you. I hope you can find peace now, free from the weight of my betrayal. Destroy this page and hand the second one to the authorities. It's my full confession. I take all the blame. I wish I could restore your lost years, but I pray for your forgiveness. Please share happy memories with your future children, not stories of how I shattered our lives. May you and Blake have a long and joyful marriage. Don't let anyone lead you astray. With all my love, Mother. P.S. Please seek help and get the support you need. The letter you hold bears the weight of my guilt. By the time you read this, I will be gone. I couldn't endure the shame any longer. I ended the lives of those men, my lovers. They paid for taking me from your father. I always belonged to him. Perhaps now I can find my way back to him. May God forgive me. May God forgive me. My love for you endures. I'm sorry for destroying our life before Martin. Once we had a perfect family, your mother." Jenny met with Detective Jordan, exchanging brief greetings before taking a seat. As the detective read through the letter, he expressed his sympathy to Jenny, admitting his past suspicions. Jenny nodded, still struggling to process her mother's actions, and speculating that her mother might have lost her sanity long ago. She couldn't grasp why Angela would date men just to kill them, finding it hard to fathom. Yet Jenny acknowledged that some pieces fit her mother's alibi had always seemed vague, and there was never solid evidence linking anyone else to the murders. She shared that she had once suspected either her father or Schindler's ex-wife, but their alibis held up too. Jenny felt relief wash over her, believing that the nightmare of the murders, her mother's anguish, and her own suffering had finally ended. She said her goodbyes to Detective Jordan and left the police station. Outside, she smiled to herself, shaking her head. Standing by her car, she looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, Mum.